Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unfiltered Information Podcast. This week we're doing a special one. It's over the internet, not in person. Sorry about not being able to see my face in the corner there. We're having some issues, but we can see Scotty over here, so that's good enough. Scotty is a paranormal investigator and a psychic medium with the P.A.R.S Paranormal group out of New Jersey. And yeah, Scotty, how you doing? Thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it.
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited for this. Very excited.
Yeah, me too. I don't even know what we're going to talk about. It should be fun.
Yeah, I've had a crazy obsession with the paranormal for a very long time. Ever since I was a kid, I always found it very interesting. Any show that was on or movie or anything like that, I was always drawn to instantly.
Yeah, what's your favorite show out there right now?
Right now, you might laugh at me, but I love Ghost Adventures. I love Zach Bagans and them. I know it's probably not the most accurate for ghost hunting, but it's very entertaining. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know what, man? I tell everybody that there's a lot, and not coming from me, but there is a lot of hate out in the paranormal community for that guy. But I always tell people, like, yo, he's been around for the longest on TV. He has to sell commercials, and it is fun, and they're still doing paranormal stuff. So, give a guy a break.
Yeah. Yeah, I did another podcast a couple months back with another paranormal investigator, and unfortunately the audio got all messed up. And she was kind of explaining how her and her group weren't the biggest fan of him, and that was kind of my first introduction to the fact that people kind of disliked him in the community. She said that it was he just kind of overdoes everything, and they might fake evidence and stuff for views. And I never really thought about that, but I guess they could.
So one of the things that I talk to people about as far as like quote unquote faking evidence for TV, I don't know if they're faking it as much as they're saying like, okay, that happened, but they have somebody behind the camera like a production manager being like, all right, that was cool, but can you like really overact it and sell it? And they're like, well, yeah, of course we can, because we want to sell a $50,000 ad or whatever it goes for, during the episode. So yeah, we'll go back and redo it. But I think that they are having genuine experiences. I can't say that everybody's getting possessed every time or, weird things like that happening, but I've not been to the locations they've been to, so I can't speak firsthand. But yeah, it's an interesting show, and that guy has been doing it forever, so we got to give him some credit there.
Yeah, they do go to some crazy freaking places. Actually, they went to like Dracula's mansion at one point or something like that. Or
yeah,
yeah,
Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad
That was
the
a very
Impaler,
cool
yeah.
episode.
It's
Yeah.
craziness. But they make money off ads. You said I didn't know that either.
Yeah, sure. Anything if you don't know anything about the TV production or the folks out there, like it's kind of like your podcast. If you get lucky, somebody might want to put an ad inside your podcast, and they'll pay you, whatever it is, $20 a spot. And the more entertaining your podcast is, the more people listen to it, and the more the ads cost. It's the same thing for TV. And I think those guys are on 14 or 15 seasons of Ghost Adventures, so they're doing something right. And I'm sure that they're making a lot of money off of ads. And that guy has a gambit of things. He's a smart man. He's got his haunted house that he runs out there in Vegas and all that cool stuff, and he's just doing it right as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear that the other side of the totem pole on that one, coming from I'm only hearing someone talk negative to someone talk positive. It's good to see there's a balance and not everyone's kind of against them.
Yeah, you know what, man? I don't have any hate for anybody out there. TV's probably, like, I have some friends that have done TV. I'm friends with TV investigators or whatever. It's a tough world to be a part of, and we all have the same goal. We want to be involved in the paranormal, and some of us do it in front of a TV screen, and some of us kind of just do it the way myself and the P.A.R.S team do it. We just do it behind the screens, and we get it out there as best we can when people care to look it up or want to understand what we're up to.
Now, you mentioned that you want to be involved with the paranormal. What's the reason for that? What was the first thing that kind of made you begin wanting to be an investigator? Did you have like an experience, or was it kind of a series of experiences?
Well, like you'd mentioned in the beginning, I'm a psychic medium. I'm 39 years old, and I've had experiences since I was about 3 or 4 years old. So like you, I've had a fascination with the paranormal my entire life. Once the TV show started coming around, I also was like you. I was glued to the TV. I remember when Ghost Hunters first aired on Sci-Fi. I got a glimpse of that, and I was like immediately drawn to it. And I was like, I'm going to watch this. And I watched every episode. Every time, whenever it was new, I was planted in front of the TV. So it was something awesome. And then the Long Island Medium came along, and then all of a sudden it was okay to like talk to ghosts and all that. Like it wasn't looked down on anymore, right? Um, then basically what got me into the paranormal investigation side of it, aside from just my own personal pursuit of it, is I had a very jarring experience uh, in a movie theater one night, a very old movie theater, and it prompted me, like many people, to go on the internet and start looking for a paranormal investigation team. And I found the P.A.R.S team that way. And I explained to them what happened. And Patrick, the founder of the team, was very happy to sit down and talk with me. And from there, we grew a friendship and a relationship. And then I joined the team shortly after that. And we've been doing it ever since.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the experience? If you don't feel comfortable, no reason to pressure you into it, though, of course.
Oh, no, no, not at all. I talk about it all the time. I haven't talked about it in a while. So it's a funny story. Quite a while back, if you remember when the first Deadpool movie came out, it was a big deal. My wife and I wanted to go see it, and we went to the big movie theater in town, and it was completely sold out. So we jumped on the phone and saw that the old movie theater, a couple towns over, was also showing it like 20 minutes from the start time we were at right now. So we cruised over there. The theater was completely empty except for myself, my wife, like three frat boys in the back, and my very interesting guest. There was this old man sitting in the front row of the movie theater for Deadpool, and I leaned over to my wife and I said, "Do you see that guy up there?" And she was like, "No, there's nobody back there." And or up there rather. And I was like, "Okay." So we watched the movie, and I kind of forgot about the guy, and he just disappeared. I didn't see him anymore. So let me tell your listeners and you that this theater is the kind of old theater where you walk in and the box office is immediately right in front of you, so you have to pay for your ticket. You walk directly into the concession stand and then right into the theater. And it has that very old basement smell. The rugs are like a deep red and they're from like 50 years ago at least. And this place just has that old school theater vibe. So that all is adding to my like heightened experience that I'm having in this place. So we go to leave, and as we're leaving, I look both ways coming out of the doors to the theater, and I'm like, man, maybe I'll see this guy. And there's nobody. So we end up leaving. That night, I ended up having a really bad night of sleep. And we had a newborn child at the time. So my wife was like, the second night, my wife was like, look, if you're going to sleep really bad like that, just go down and sleep on the couch because I need to get some sleep too. So I was fine with that. So I go downstairs on the couch and I go to sleep. And in the middle of the night, I wake up and I feel like I'm being strangled. Like there's hands around my neck. So I immediately was like, holy crap, what is happening here? Somebody's on top of me. I open my eyes and I start trying to push something off of me, and there's nobody there. And I realize that it's very dark in front of me, whereas there's a street light in front of my house. There should be some light in the living room, and there's none. So I immediately just started praying instinctively, and as I started doing that, the force weakened, and I was able to stand up off the couch, and this black shadow was like just 6 feet from me or so, and it took off up. One part of the shadow went up the stairs up into the bedroom area, and the other half split off into my kitchen, which is at the bottom of the steps there. And I ran after it, making sure nobody was actually in the house, and there's nobody. So that was my experience that I had there. And it prompted me to be like, if there is a ghost there, why would it ever come back to my house and bother me? What did I do? Because I wasn't investigating anything. I was just having a nice night with my wife, right? So that prompted me to reach out, and I found P.A.R.S, and it's a really funny story. Patrick has me meet him at a coffee shop that is literally doors down from the movie theater.
No way.
And Patrick happened to own the building 4 doors down from the movie theater at the time. And I told him this experience that I had, and he was like, oh, well, I happen to know the guy that owns the place, and he said we can investigate anytime we want. Unfortunately, we never got the opportunity to do that, but we did make a name for ourselves quickly because we got to investigate many spaces on that street that all had noted paranormal activity. It was really cool.
So do you think that like it was kind of just destiny or fate that you kind of was on the same street and the 4 buildings away from where you've had your first experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought happened. I was just like, this has to be like somebody guiding me in that direction because there's no there's no way that I contacted a team and the guy who runs it happens to live 4 doors down from where I had this experience. And that wasn't the first experience I had on that street. When I was a younger man, when I was in my 20s, probably about 20 years old or so, I worked with an electrician and we were in a building on that same street um, installing wire in a basement for a laundromat. And I was downstairs in this old crusty basement helping run wires. I was down there by myself and I started to have this crazy feeling come over me while I was down there. It's the middle of June or July. It's a warm summer day. I always say this. It's bright and sunny out. I'm not thinking of anything scary or paranormal. Basements don't bother me. I'm just down there doing my thing. And all of a sudden, I start to get this overwhelming feeling of fear come over me. And then my thoughts just get flooded with like graphic murder scene crap. Like I can't even explain it. It was just a terrible feeling. And it freaked me out. So I ran out of the basement. I ran upstairs and I told my boss at the time, I was like, I'm not going back down there. I feel like there's something down in that basement that does not want me here. And he laughed at me and he was like, whatever, we're done for the day anyway. And we wrapped up the job. And then years later, when I met Patrick and I told him about the movie theater incident, I told him about this other building, and we were able to coax the owner into letting us in that basement, and we were able to capture some interesting evidence in that place. It's a big round story for that, the way this all got started.
Now, do you guys know if there was any past history of like murder in that building that you saw those scenes in, or was it just kind of like what do you think it was?
So the building itself, we couldn't find anything that would indicate that there was anything like that had happened. However, we did find out that there was a tenant that lived in the basement for a while. And according to the people that were there for a while, they said that he was a bit of a strange guy, kept to himself, rarely left the basement, which isn't in of itself anything paranormal, but it is strange. But we do know that block, that entire block, was well known for a while for being associated with bootlegging and what they called rum running and taking alcohol from the New Jersey side of the New York Harbor into New York City during the time of Prohibition. And that town was very heavily run by the mafia at the time. There are tunnels all through the town. There's all kinds of secret entrances in and out of people's basements and in and out of those buildings. And that's a fact. That's historical. So we know that strange things were happening there that were against the law. And most likely some kind of mafia activity was going on there, which doesn't mean it did, but it could have included some type of foul play.
Now, obviously, you were probably in a dark when you were in the movie theater that time when you were seeing you saw that old man. But were you able to see the old man's outfit? Did he kind of resemble that time period?
Yeah, you know what I tell people he looked like to me, and this is funny. I have people laugh at me all the time. I said he looked a little bit like Bernie Sanders. He had like on this suit that didn't quite fit, and he had disheveled gray hair, and he just like looked out of sorts the whole time. So that's kind of how I could best describe him.
Gotcha. So what's the most concrete piece of evidence you guys have ever collected, you and your group, or you by yourself?
So let's see. Concrete. I don't think that there's anything super concrete in the paranormal. However, we've had a lot of really good evidence captures. Some very good EVPs. Some very good what we call like anecdotal sort of evidence. So we got called to a horse farm, which is basically, for anybody who may not know, it's just a farm where they board horses, and that's just all they do there. They don't grow any food. They just board horses. And the horses that live there were having a lot of issues. The people who were visiting their horses were commenting to each other that there was a lot of paranormal activity. And one of the people who owned the horses knew me and knew that I was into the investigations. So they contacted me. I went there, and I ended up having a really great, like one of the craziest experiences I've ever had in my life. long story short, I was in a completely dark barn with two other people who were showing me around, who were familiar with the area. Um, we saw a shadow form in a doorway, and it looked as if it was pacing back and forth. It was about 15 feet from us. And I said out loud, I just want to talk to you, whoever you are. And with that, the entire room lit up purple, like a black light was turned on in the room. And it was in an instant. And as that happened, I got hit with like a burst of air in my face. There's a young man standing to my left who threw himself against a wall, and he yelled at me, "Dude, it's looking in your ear." And with that, everything went black again. And we flipped a light on in this barn, and he looked at me. He was ghost white, and he was like, "Dude, there was like a reptile looking thing just staring down your ear as all of that happened." And I was like, "Okay, it's time for me to end what I'm doing here tonight, and I'm gonna go get the rest of the team." So we came back about a week later with a bunch of cameras and all the doodads and buzzers that you see on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite pieces of equipment is called a REM pod. And basically that just works off by giving off its own electronic magnetic field. And if anything breaks that field, the REM pod will go off. So we set the REM pod up in the area where I had this experience a week prior. And we have it on our YouTube channel, so if anybody wants to check this out, just look up P.A.R.S team. Let me look. I'll tell you exactly what to look up.
After this podcast, if you want to send me a link to the thing, I can put in the description of this video too.
I will do that.
Anybody
who just wants to look up P.A.R.S, P.A.R.S, REM pod communication. The video is about a minute and a half long. Basically, what happens is we're all in the dark. The REM pod starts going off. And my daughter, who was with me at the time, helping the team, was 15 at the time. She said, "Dad, the thing is going off." So I said, "Hey, can you stop making that go off?" And it stopped going off. And then from there, I was asking it questions, and using the REM pod, it was intelligently answering yes and no for what it wanted us to do. And it's a really interesting piece of equipment, and a piece of evidence as it happened. One of the things I would say is that the REM pod sometimes will not go off for like 10 investigations. And then you get it into certain spaces and it will go off like crazy. But this is the only time in going on about 8 years of doing this that I've ever had it intelligently answer questions. So it was really crazy. And basically what the conclusion of that was that whatever is there in that form is just going to stay there, because it was a pretty dark kind of thing, and it's just not going to leave. And we kind of just told everybody to not talk about it, don't mess with it. And if you have any problem, just call us and we'll see what we can do from there. But it was a pretty heavy investigation.
I don't mean to backtrack, but you said it looked like a reptile when it was in your ear. Does that indicate that it was kind of like more of a demonic side of an entity?
So, for anybody who doesn't know me or the P.A.R.S team, I tend not to say the D word unless it's like a true thing. Like I can verify that that's what it would probably be. What I will say is that it was definitely a low level entity. It did not like people. It didn't like animals. It didn't even like other spirits. I ran into other spirits there that I was able to communicate, and they told me as I'm doing the investigation, the other spirits were like, "We don't go past certain points on this property because that's where it lives, and it doesn't like us and we don't like it, so we stay away from it." So was it a demon? I don't know, but there are other classifications of negative things that live. I suspect that this entity was probably something left behind by Native Americans that used to inhabit the property there. It was very heavily populated by the Lenni Lenape for thousands of years. And then the town was settled, and basically the entire tribe, like most places in America, unfortunately, these people were not treated with respect. And sadly, they were, all murdered and didn't get proper burials. And they're just, you know how it goes, that the land is just taken and they're forgotten. So I think they left something behind to protect. And if you were to see this giant piece of property in the middle of a super developed town, you'd say to yourself, like, why doesn't anybody develop this big piece of property? And I think because it's heavily protected by whatever this thing is. And if anybody ever did knock down that horse farm to put in homes, people wouldn't live there and it would fail because of how miserable this thing would make life for people.
Now, is that a common occurrence in the past? Native American tribes leaving entities or spirits behind when they were kind of pushed off their land, or is that kind of just like one few vengeful event?
I don't know if it's super common. I know that Hollywood makes it seem like it might be more so than not because of that movie Poltergeist, right?
Yep.
But as far as I could tell, this is probably the only time I've ever come in contact with something like that. Um, and it happens to be in the same town that I live in, so I know a ton about the history here. And that just came because I had to learn about all this paranormal stuff and why things might be occurring. So it's an interesting thing.
Gotcha. This is kind of a silly question, but I thought it was kind of important to ask it. When you do investigations, do you do it in the dark, or is that just for on TV shows? Like, do they they shut the lights off on all the TV shows? Is it just,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's not a stupid question. It's not even a silly question. It's a great question because what you see on TV is great. If you have noticed the shift on television from using all green infrared cameras, now if you watch like Ghost, what's the other one? Ghost Nation, they all film with the lights on pretty much because I think that in the beginning it was a novelty to shoot like that. I don't think they captured any more activity shooting like that than they would have with the lights on. But one thing that I do tell people that's really interesting is that if you think about when most paranormal experiences happen, now this isn't all, but most, it will be at nighttime and it will be when things are dark. And I think that the reason for that is that one, nighttime, we are human beings, we're partially animals. Our fight or flight gets heightened, so we're much more aware of things, and that's just built into us. So as a point of protection to keep us safe from predators that we had to have to evolve to this point. So that's still part of us. Then when the lights go out, we get a little bit more heightened. So, if you're sitting in a room and somebody were to drop something and the lights are on, it's not that loud. But once the lights go out, you're really listening to it so you can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So people tend to have a heightened experience when the lights are out. So that's good as an investigator because you are paying much closer attention because you're relying much heavier on your other senses to understand what's happening around you. And you might feel cold spots happen, or you might hear something that you wouldn't have otherwise heard if the lights were on. And I think that's really important. So the P.A.R.S team, our stance is that we can investigate all day and into the night. And if you were to call us and say, at 2:30 in the afternoon, most days X, Y, and Z happens and it's very paranormal to us, that's when we're going to investigate. On the flip side of it, if you tell us at 2:30 in the morning every night people are waking up with nightmares, or that's when we hear the creaking in the house or whatever is happening, that's when we're going to be there to investigate.
So you guys will investigate all day if need be, you said, though?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it's not just people think, I guess, in my opinion, from doing this for a while, is that folks find that the paranormal will happen mostly at night, and that they think that the house is haunted. But when we have done investigations in the past, we find that that's not necessarily always true. Sometimes a person can be haunted, the land can be haunted, and then just in that home or that space they're experiencing things. So we don't want to discount the fact that things could be happening during the day that you're not picking up on, or there's just so many different variables that if you just put yourself there from 9 at night till 4 in the morning, you might be missing a chunk of really important evidence that's happening during the daytime as well that your client doesn't even realize is happening.
Yeah, I can definitely back that up. I live in a haunted house, and I've had most of my experiences personally have happened during the daytime or the afternoon time for me and my friends, for what we have seen personally, or I've heard them say they've seen.
Yeah, so if you were to tell us and say like, hey, we would really need you to check our house out, we would come during the day and start the investigation early because we'd want to see like what's happening here during the day. Can we get intelligent responses? Can we determine what's happening here, if it is paranormal or not paranormal, which is just as important.
Now, for those who don't
So,
know, what type of equipment do you guys use for someone who may not know much about the paranormal?
so common equipment that we use that is something called a K2 meter, which just measures what they call EMF. Generally, I don't use that to find the paranormal. I personally like to use that tool as a way to find things that are not paranormal. So we look for high electrical magnetic fields through the house. And EMF can cause people to have hallucinations, feel like they're being watched. In high cases, it could cause rashes and even delusion. So we use that tool. It's just a little black box with a bunch of lights on it, and it lights up whenever there's high EMF. That's a good tool for checking for what's not haunted. Then we use something else called a Mel meter, which is a tool specifically developed for paranormal investigation. It's similar to a K2 meter, except for that some of them have graphs in the front that are built in, and it can show you on a scale of like 0 to 200, I think, how strong of a EMF field there is, which is really important. Usually in the Mel meter also, there's built-in temperature sensor. It's very, very sensitive so that we can monitor if there's any temperature fluctuation that's major, either up or down. And then some of the more high-end models of that particular item are built with the thing that I was talking about earlier is called the REM pod, which puts off its own EMF field in a bit of a bubble. And if you are to break that plane, it will set off that meter, which we use to determine if something might be intelligently trying to get our attention. Aside from that, some basic tools that I really like, and anybody listening to this can do this today when they're done listening to the podcast. There is a cool app that you can get on Apple and Android called Hey Tell. It's HEYTELL. It's supposed to be used as a walkie-talkie tool. However, what it does is you hold down the button on the app, and when you open it up, you could see it, and you can say something. It will record your voice, and then you're supposed to be able to send that voice recording to somebody else who has the app. However, what we found out is that it makes the microphone in your phone so sensitive that it picks up a tremendous amount of EVPs, which is electronic voice phenomenon. And we have a tremendous amount of success hearing spirits speak to us using that app. And then the more basic thing that people have seen in the same realm is just voice recorders. There's a lot of great ones out there. There's a Panasonic one. There's Sony. There's I don't know, any brand, and you can pick them up at the drugstore for like $30. But your smartphone can do the same thing with a recording app. The EVPs to me are the best bits of information. Besides, if you can get a solid video. Let's see, what else do we use that's really great? We just recently started using something called a static dome, which is it's a green dome. It reacts off static electricity instead of EMF, which, if you rub a balloon on your head, you get all that static electricity. Well, during paranormal events, we find that people get goosebumps or their hair raises up on their arms, and that's usually due to some kind of static electricity fluctuation. So there's a thought that maybe spirits can manipulate that as well, or maybe that's what they've been doing the whole time. So we started using what's called a static dome, and it basically will light up the lights around it. The stronger the static electricity charges, the higher the lights go up on that particular machine. And then of course we use full spectrum cameras. We have some infrared cameras, and then a lot of times I just like using my cell phone to record stuff. It records in 4K, has fantastic audio capability, so it's the best tool that you have in your pocket anyway. As I always like to say, it's the best thing to use is what you have.
So for someone someone was just starting out as an investigator, or they just want to do it casually, you would recommend using a phone and that app? That would be kind of enough to do the basics, you think?
Yeah, I think you can get away with that. What I would tell people is that if you're going to use your phone, just do the best thing to do is to put it into airplane mode, so that way you're not getting any outside interference. The phone won't be sending or receiving any information, and the phone will, if you do have any other devices out, your phone will set off a K2 meter. It would set off the the static charge meter. It sets off everything. It's such a powerful device. So we always say, if you're going to use it, put it in airplane mode, and then just be responsible. If you're going to do an EVP session, don't provoke anything, and just ask the usual questions. See where your investigation leads you. Write it down and save everything. Document what's happening, and that's all you have to do. And then if you want to make it a little bit better, if you want to use it for video stuff, just like anything else, set it up on a tripod and monitor it. That's it.
Now, you mentioned not to provoke anything. Has that ever happened with you guys? If you've accidentally or unintentionally done that and without meaning to, and had kind of repercussions with that from a spirit?
So I don't think that we've ever intentionally done provocation. That's not generally something that we try to do. As a matter of fact, we try not to do it. Mostly because it goes back to what we always like to say is like, well, I don't have to live here. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make sure that when I leave, your situation isn't worse because I'm here to make it better and not make it terrible. But we have had some very interesting things happen just because we were investigating. In my own home, I've had my son, when he was very young, would find himself sleeping in between myself and my wife in our bed, which I hated, by the way, but he did it. And he was a big kid, even at 2 years old. And I'm a pretty big dude. And one night, we accepted an investigation. The lady told us that there was something negative in the house. And that night, when we accepted the case, in the middle of the night, my son, I heard him hit the ground on my side of the bed, and I woke up and I look over, and my son is laying on the ground, and he looks up at me completely confused because he just woke up. And he looks at me, and I was like, "How did you get down there?" And he just looked at me, and he just started crying. And he was like, I don't know. And I think what happened is something may have, and I know it sounds crazy, but something may have lifted him up and dropped him on the floor. Because the case that we were taking, whatever was in the house was intentionally going after the children in the house. And then that night, me being the only one with young children on the team, that happened. Is it a coincidence? Maybe. Is it paranormal? I can't say for sure, but it was a very interesting thing to happen on the same exact night that we took a case where something was bullying the kids in the house.
Yeah, that's gonna be a scary thing. Investigating something like that's one thing, but having that happen at your home and happening to your children nonetheless has got to be a kind of a rude awakening of some sort.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
No, you're good.
We tell people that if you are going to seriously get into the paranormal field and start investigating, you have to be ready for the consequences of the things that could happen, like things not liking that you're coming and coming to your house in order to scare you or unnerve you in order to keep you from coming to where they are, so that they can keep doing what they're doing. I work with a lot of experienced investigators, and all of them have had that sort of thing happen to them.
Has that happened to you more than one time?
Yeah, we've had spirits in my house where I'm recording right now mimic people in the family. And for anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's very simple that a spirit will pretend to be somebody else in the house. And usually it's to cause distrust and tension in the house. So one evening I was leaving for an investigation. I was in this room that I'm in right now. I was packing all my gear up. I left, and my wife called me on the phone, and she was like, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the car, like 5 minutes away from the house. What's wrong?" She said, "Well, I just was upstairs, and I heard you yelling for me from downstairs, and I came down here, and you're not here." And I said, "Yeah, that wasn't me. I'm not home. I'm out." And she knew where I was going, so it was very, very strange. Then a couple days later, my daughter, who I mentioned earlier, she was probably around 14 or 15 at the time, her and I were sitting on the couch in the living room watching television, and my wife had her back to us in the kitchen, and she was emptying out the dishwasher. And I heard my wife say to my daughter something, but it was mumbled, and we couldn't make out what she said. And my daughter said, "What did you say to me?" And my wife stood up and looked at us, and she's like, "Are you talking to me?" And I was like, "Yeah, what did you just say to her?" And my wife was like, "I'm not talking to anybody. I didn't say anything." But my daughter and I very clearly heard somebody speaking as if they were my wife. It was a very strange thing. So at that moment, we decided to sage the house and cleanse it out. And and that was the end of that. But it seemed to be something was trying to stir up some trouble here at home.
Mm. Have has that happened to other team members too that they've heard voices? Like, did it ever correspond with other investigations or anything that you know of?
I don't know. We'd have to ask them to see if they have any experiences like that. Patrick, who's the founder of P.A.R.S, he's a funny guy. He says that he's about as psychic as a pine board. And he's one of these guys that is absolutely into the paranormal, and he is all about using he's the reason why we have so many gizmos and gadgets. He invested a lot of money in that stuff for us to be able to do this. And that's what he relies on in order for us to do this. So I don't know if he's ever had anything happen in his home. But he has asked me questions about things that have gone on in his home. But he's what I love about having him on the team is he's such a, like, you have to prove it to the end. He believes, but you have to prove it to the end. Whereas as I am the psychic medium, I'm much more susceptible to the things happening around me. I don't know if it's susceptible. I'm more perceptive of the things going on around me. So it doesn't take as much proof for me to believe as to what's happening around me than it does for him.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good thing at the same time, though, that you guys don't go out of your way to prove everything is paranormal. Like you said earlier with the equipment, for instance, too. You said you have devices where you strictly use to prove that things aren't paranormal sometimes, and that
Yeah, absolutely.
The Patrick doesn't. He needs an overwhelming amount of evidence to kind of prove it to himself, that's a good thing. You don't want everything that you see to think it's paranormal, because that credits what you do
Yeah.
see even more.
Yeah, that's we've been in homes where people got upset with us because we were in a home where I just told them that, we walked through, I didn't feel anything, the equipment wasn't picking anything up. And the house was in general disarray, which can make you feel uncomfortable. And then downstairs in the basement, there was it's a private investigation. I won't use any names, but there was like mouse droppings in the basement. There was black mold growing in the rafters. And it was just one of those things where it's just like, of course you feel terrible in this house. Like, it's not clean. It's not livable. So after you can clean the black mold up and clean up the other issues that you have in the house, then we can say we can do a good, proper paranormal investigation. But as of right now, I could tell you that if I tried to live here, I'd feel completely out of sorts. And I'm somebody who lives in kind of clutter. I don't mind a bit of things on my desk or, my clothes in a basket or something like that. It doesn't bother me. But the way that this house was, it would just make you feel uncomfortable to be there. Like if you've ever been in like a frat house, we're like 10 young men are living and just everything is everywhere. That kind of disarray. That's how I felt. And it was actually a family. So it was just one of those things where I was like, we can't do a good investigation here because it already is starting in a non-paranormal way. Like you need to get your house straight before it can be investigated properly. They didn't like that, but it is the answer, unfortunately.
For that particular case, did you guys end up catching anything, or was it kind of just like a bust?
Yeah, it was a complete bust. As far as being any psychic impressions, I got nothing. We didn't pick up anything on the cameras, nothing on the audio recorders. There was nothing. It was completely flat there. So that's why that also led me to believe that they were experiencing, for anybody that doesn't know, black mold is a really terrible thing. It shouldn't be in your living environment. And neither should rat droppings. There are all sorts of things that can lead to you being sick, nervous system issues, and even worse, things that deal with your brain and make you hallucinate and feel sick. So you have to take care of all the non-paranormal stuff first before we can dive into even thinking that there is a supernatural paranormal ghost issue.
Has that happened repeatedly where you've kind of found that there was pre-existing conditions that kind of might have caused the illusion of a paranormal activity going on?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that we, even before we go to a location, usually we have somebody on the team screen the person who called us. And we always tell everybody, we believe what you're telling us. We believe that you believe you have a problem. But when we get there, we're going to look for all of the non-paranormal issues first. And Patrick is a very good handyman. He's built things from studs up. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to electricity and plumbing. So he is good at doing a home inspection, basically, to make sure that everything is on the up and up with the house. He knows how the HVAC systems work and all that kind of stuff. And after he is ruled out that everything looks good in those capacities, we can move forward. So in some instances, it's not been a total thing because sometimes we get somewhere and we're like, well, the creaking is because the boards are expanding when your forced hot air comes on, or when the what's the other stuff? The baseboard heat, the pipes expand, they cause a lot of noise. Then we have I don't know, just all kinds of house stuff. If you live in a house, you know how it goes.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in apartments too, we deal with a lot of crazy stuff. Like you can hear talking and it's thin walls and stuff like that. But sometimes we get places and it's half and half. I will pick up on strange paranormal things that are happening or spirits that are around, and it's half that and half the old house they live in.
Now, do people typically get upset with you if you kind of are saying that there's pre-existing things going on, or are they usually understanding?
No, usually they're pretty understanding. They actually, most people don't want their house to be haunted, so they're happy when we tell them like, yeah, there's no haunting happening here, or if it is, it's very mild and you're going to be okay. They're happy when we find things that are easily explainable to them that they just didn't think of, and it that's what we're there for. We're there to bring relief to them in any way that we can. So if we can explain away things that are happening to them, they typically are happy with that.
Gotcha. We were talking earlier about we talked about Ghost Hunters, Ghost Nation, Ghost Adventures. What TV show is kind of like the best depiction of what it's like to being on an investigation?
So there are a couple good ones. I would say that probably Ghost Nation.
Oh. Hopefully he comes back on. That was weird timing. Yeah, me too. Just...
Huh?
Sorry about the difficulties here, guys. He should be back on in a minute. I've never had this
I'm
issue
back.
before. Sorry about that. There we go.
There we go. All right.
That
So
was weird timing.
you asked me the best depiction of what it's like to be on a paranormal investigation, right?
Yep.
Okay, so basically, I would say that Ghost Nation is probably Ghost Nation, old school Ghost Hunters is probably the best depiction of what it's like. What I was saying is that the difference between a real life investigation and the ones that are done on TV is the ones done on TV, those folks could be there for 1, 2, 3 weeks collecting evidence for a 45-minute TV show, whereas our team, generally we get 3 or 4 people that can get a day off together and we all go together. So we try to spend as much time in a location, maybe 8 to 10 hours. And that's our time that we are able to spend there on location to gather evidence. So what we get usually is what we get, unless it's so severe that we have to go back a couple times in order to capture the things that we're looking for to understand what is better happening, which we've done before. But yeah, Ghost Nation does a great job where they send the guys in. I think Dave does like a lot of the background, and then they go into the field and they do all the evidence collection, which is great. But our team adds another facet to it, which is me, which is if any of your listeners are fans of the Dead Files, they have Amy Allen. Well, I do what she does. Generally, nobody will tell me about the location at all. They won't tell me about any of the issues that are happening there. Basically, Patrick or somebody will pick me up or just give me the address and say like, this is where we're going, or meet us there. I go, I will meditate on it. I'll write down a bunch of notes, and then I just go in and we compare my walkthrough or my notes with the things that are happening. And we use that as part of what to look for on the location. So many times I will write down some things that sometimes I find kind of unbelievable that are accurate. And we feel like, well, if I'm picking up psychically and it's the same kind of claims that the client's making, then that's probably the direction that we want the rest of the investigation to go into. And that's the way we kind of handle it.
Now, are there ever times where you said you meditate and you kind of do your own research while the group does theirs? Is there ever a time when your research, like your findings and their findings, never kind of correspond and anything like that, or is it usually kind of just on point?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I tell people, and this is really important for anybody out there that's listening that might think that they have a gift or they are sensitive to these sorts of things, it's not important for you as the medium or the psychic to always be right. It's okay to be wrong, because you may not necessarily be wrong about everything. But it's more important to gather tangible evidence to help articulate what's happening at the location in order to remove whatever's happening so that the client can have peace, right? So I'm very blessed where I'd say like 90% of the stuff that I talk about in my meditations and my notes and stuff before we get somewhere have some bearing on what we're doing. And the stuff that doesn't, I just say like, well, it doesn't have anything to do with this, but it doesn't mean that it might be unknown information that the homeowner doesn't know about, or it might have something to do with the property next door or a neighbor next door or a previous owner that nobody has the evidence of. And I'm always cool with that because it's just extra information and it doesn't mean anything. And when I don't think I've ever been completely off base with everything, but if it does happen, it's okay. It's not a big deal. And we always want to go with whatever we can actually prove.
Gotcha. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum for I asked you about the TV show. What's kind of the worst kind of representation of the paranormal society in that whole area? Like, is there any show that's like so bad with it that like it's just like kind of does it bad justice to the whole kind of
Man,
practice?
that I I would say the name of the TV show if I could remember it. It was on probably about a year ago now, and this, if you could call them a paranormal team, they went into this old dilapidated building which nobody lived in anyway. Somebody was saying that there was something happening there, and they ended up allegedly, this is what they showed on TV, dumping holy water down a toilet in order to get rid of a demon that was coming through the pipes. And I went on such a tirade on social media because those kinds of things make us legitimate people look terrible. And I don't think that show ever came back on the air. And it obviously wasn't just because of me. I think every paranormal investigator on planet Earth that saw that episode was just like, this needs to never see the light of day again. That was miserable.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awful, actually. I've never heard of that show, but I'm happy I haven't for that reason.
Yeah, if I could remember the name of the show, I'd say it so people could look it up and just be like, oh my God, no kidding. He was not joking.
Now, what's your favorite place that you've ever investigated, like personally?
Oh, that's very easy. There's a hotel in Napanoch, New York called the Shanley Hotel. It is without a doubt the most haunted place that anybody can go and stay for a night and have an experience. Hands down, 100%. If you go there, you will have an experience. And I have had skeptics go there and they get shut down immediately because of all the crazy activity that happens in that place.
Did you guys stay there, or did you just investigate it?
I have been there many times. I'm actually going there. I don't know when you're airing this, but it's a Thursday as we record this. I'm going there tomorrow night for an event. I started off by somebody who paid to stay there with the P.A.R.S team and investigate. And then I ended up falling in love with the place like immediately because of the amazing stuff that happened in there. And then I kept coming back, and eventually they started asking me to come up and be a part of their events. And I'm not just saying this because they have asked me to do that kind of thing. I'm telling you that anybody listening to this, if you live on the East Coast or if you're looking to come to the East Coast and you want to go to a place and have an experience, this place will give it to you 100%. It was on Ghost Hunters, the original run back in like, I want to say 2006 or 2007. It had different owners, but the ghosts are the same. And every time I go there, there is something new that happens.
Now, what's the kind of the biggest experience you had that made it your favorite place you've investigated?
So the first night that I went there, um, a couple years ago, I went with the P.A.R.S team. Like I said, I got there late to the event because I had a whole day of readings, and then it's a 2 hour drive from where I live in New Jersey. So I got there around like 8:30 at night. I put my bags in my room and I got going, and everybody had already broken up into teams. And there was not just the P.A.R.S team there. We invited a bunch of other people to come with us so that it could bring the cost to the investigation down, which was nice, but it wasn't too many, maybe like 15 people. Anyways, we got to go in the basement, and I vlog a lot of the things that I do for my Scotty the Medium stuff.
Hmm.
And I was doing a vlog for it, and I went downstairs in the basement with a couple people, and on one of the doors there's a handwritten note, and the handwritten note says "Do not enter." And I'm thinking like a filmmaker, and I'm like, well, this will look cool if I can put this in the vlog somewhere. So I took my camera and I scrolled across this thing that says "Do not enter" with the camera. And as I did it, somebody physically whispered into my ear like this, "Do not enter." And I heard it with my ears, and I looked at everybody and nobody's talking. They're just like looking down at their stuff, getting ready to investigate. And I freaked out. I played the audio back immediately, and I caught it. And you can very clearly hear it say, "Do not enter." And if anybody wants to check that out, I'll leave a link for you for that particular vlog. And all that night, all kinds of crazy stuff like that happened. A mist, lots of EVPs, a ghost said my name through one of those spirit box things, like just all kinds of stuff.
Did anyone else happen to hear that whisper in the moment, or was it just you and you happened to pick it up?
It was just me. I'm the only one who heard it, even though I had somebody standing 2 or 3 feet away from me. But when I played it back, it's very evident that it was said.
Mm.
Then what was even more interesting is, and I'll not to give away too much of the vlog, but as I was walking back up the steps past that closet where the words were written, I kind of made a joke like, "Oh, I wonder if it would do it again, if that would happen or whatever, something like that." And you hear another EV piece, and it says something to the effect of like, "Keep going."
Huh.
But there was a good EVP of somebody talking to me like that. It was pretty funny.
Now, in the
So
moment,
that tells
sorry.
you that there's something. No, okay, it's fine. I was just gonna say that just tells you there's something very involved there. It's very interactive, and it knows what you're doing.
I was gonna say, in the moment, is that like a scary thing to have happen to you, having someone whisper in your ear and no one else hears it, or is it kind of like a, oh, that's pretty cool type of thing, like adrenaline rush?
Yeah. Nope. Like if I was in my own house and that happened, I would be definitely freaked out. But since I was in a place looking for ghosts, it wasn't that scary. Especially since there was other people. But I would have suspected if you were alone that would be very scary if that happened.
Yeah, I'd have to second that. I wouldn't want that to happen to me personally. Um,
Definitely nobody would.
so that's your favorite place to investigate. What would your dream investigation be? What type of place would that be, or what places?
Let's see. A dream place to investigate. Hmm. I used to live in Wilmington, North Carolina, which was also a very haunted place. I would say if I could have a shot to investigate the USS North Carolina battleship, I would love to investigate that and any of the old bars and stuff down in Wilmington, North Carolina would be at. There's a lot of ghost tours down there, and there is a building that isn't at the time. I don't know what it is now, but at the time it was an architecture firm, and the building is built on top of what used to be called the Gallows, which is where the town hangings would happen on Market Street. And allegedly, the people who worked in that building would never stay after the sun went down because of all the paranormal stuff. And I always said that if I had an opportunity and somebody would let me in there for a couple hours, I would absolutely 100% want to go into that space and investigate it.
Have you and your team ever made an attempt to get that done by chance?
No, but only because that it's 10 hours away from us.
Gotcha.
That would be one of those things. It would have to be like a 2 or 3 day adventure. We'd have to make like a couple trips out of it.
Makes sense. All right, I've asked you a lot of ghost questions. Now I'm gonna ask more, if that's okay, like medium questions. I was kind of saving those for the end. I kind of divided it up between paranormal investigating and the medium side of it, just to kind of make it a little easier and more organized.
Yeah, sounds good, man. Doing a good job.
Thank you. When did you know you were first like had the potential or like the ability to speak to non-human, like non-living people and be a medium?
So the real time it happened was when I was actually in my 30s, because basically, just to preface this, like I said in the beginning, I've been able to like kind of know that there were ghosts around, and I would have weird experiences, and my parents have a lot of stories of me telling them about people that I was talking to, but I don't really recall any of that too well. It's all stories that they tell me. Then there is, fast forward a lot of years, when I'm about 32 or so. Funny story. I've told this on my podcast. I was taking a shower, and all of a sudden I get this funny thought in my head of this man talking to me, and I'm like, I might be losing my brains right now. What is happening? And this voice says, "My name is Pop. I want you to tell my daughter Vicky that I'm okay. And I want you to write some other stuff down for me and tell her." And I was like, I must be losing my mind. But something in me was just like, just do this. This is important. So I went ahead. I got out of the shower. I grabbed a notepad and I wrote down a bunch of stuff. And most notably, I wrote down about a wedding that had a blue classic muscle car in it, or was involved somehow. And I wrote down the description of this woman, who was a woman that was wearing a pink dress with white pearls, brown hair, and that her name was Anna, and that she would be standing next to a man in a tuxedo. So I was like, this is so strange. So I went to this woman who happened to be my mom's friend, and I said, would you believe if like there was a message from like somebody on the other side? And she was very open. She was like, yeah, absolutely. What do you got? And I said, well, did you call your dad Pop? And she was like, yes. And I said, okay, I wrote down this stuff and let's talk about it real quick. And I told her about the blue classic car in the wedding party. And she said, oh, well, as a matter of fact, this weekend I was at a wedding that my father would have been at if he didn't pass away. And the bridal party rented a blue classic car and they were taking photographs with it. So that fit that. And then I said, well, what about this description of this woman named Anna? And she said, that's my grandmother. That's his mom. And she was able to produce a wedding album with a photograph. And the woman, Anna, his mom, was wearing a pink dress with the white pearls and her hair was brown and the whole 9 yards. And she was standing next to her son, who was in the tux. So it was the whole thing that I had described. And that's when I realized that there was something to it.
So did that just kind of happen? That just happened out of nowhere, though, randomly in the shower one day, that you just kind of really got that thought?
Yeah, and I wasn't seeking it. I wasn't looking for it. It was not even the last thing on my mind. It was the furthest thing from my mind, because I was doing all kinds of other stuff that was non-paranormal related. I was just living a regular life, and that happened, and that catapulted me into everything, because then once that happened, I'm a very curious person by nature, which I think is part of what makes me a good investigator, because I want to know why, I want to know when, where, how. So when this happened, I was like, can I recreate this? So I started learning about what a medium was and what it meant to be able to do this, and I read a ton of books, a ton of articles, and the best thing that I realized was that I have to write everything down. And then if I write everything down with a date and then something happens, I can prove that I wrote it down before it happened and all that kind of stuff. Just like the thing with this gentleman who came to me to speak with me and pass a message to his daughter. I had already pre-written everything, so it's not like I was guessing in front of her. I had all this information before I even spoke to her. And just to have the knowledge of that photograph from a wedding day that happened before, probably 30 years before I was born, speaks volumes. So it was one of those things where I was just like, I'm supposed to do this. So it just got me going, and I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And I'm here today still doing it.
So you didn't have anyone kind of mentor you on how to go about it. You kind of just self researched and figured out that way. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Along the way, I did meet some really awesome other people who do what I do, and of course, I picked their brains and I asked them a million questions about how they do things, and we all seem to have very different ways of getting to the same goal. It's just whatever feels comfortable for the person doing it.
Gotcha. Now, when spirits kind of when they contact you, did and everybody other mediums as well, do they just kind of do like conversation in your head, or does each person kind of differ? Like, do some people get like flashes of images or something like that, or like how does that work?
Yeah, you're onto it, man. So I always tell people that I started off very visual, so I would get psychic impressions, like I would get visuals, basically like in my imagination of things, and I would be able to describe them with words, like telling a story. And then once I started to develop better, then I could really start to hear them, because the first communication I got from that gentleman pop was I was seeing the blue sports car and the wedding, but then he was telling me to talk to his daughter. So I was getting two different kinds of things right away. So that's just two parts of the ability. Some spirits will only use visual, some will only use audio. But I've gotten to the point at doing this where it's audio, visual, it's feelings, it's all kinds of different things mixed together in order to get a whole picture of who you're talking to and what messages they want to relay.
Does it ever happen to you when you're kind of like out in public with like strangers or anything like that, like their loved ones?
Yeah, sometimes. Some people might be familiar with Long Island Medium, and again, I always say that's television. That woman obviously goes out looking for people to talk to in public that might have somebody with them, so that she can sell commercials because it's fantastic. And it is. I don't beef on her at all. She's doing a great job too. Um, but basically, like if I have that kind of thing happen, I try to not do anything because it freaks more people out than not. And I don't want to be that to anybody. I don't want to scare anybody. And I don't want to, um, sometimes you come up to people and you could tell them about somebody that's on the other side that wants to talk to them and they don't want to hear from them. And I don't feel like that's my part in life to do that. Um, and that's just something I've kind of learned.
Mm. I've always kind of wondered this. I just started to ask you, 'cause I never asked a psychic this. Do you think kind of everyone more or less has the ability to tap into the psychic field, or is it kind of? Do you think that people are kind of just born like it with it?
I think that everybody to a point has an ability. I always like to use the thing of like a really good basketball player like Michael Jordan. He was probably born able to play basketball better than 90% of the people on the planet. And then he excelled because he practiced, and then he became who he was, right? Then there are other people like me. I could practice 10 times as much as Michael Jordan ever had, and I would never be anywhere near as good. It's the same thing with psychic abilities. I think that most people have it. We all have it as a part of our instinct to stay alive and understand the things that are happening in our environment. And then some of us, like myself and other people like me, are just a little bit better at understanding it and tuning into it and really using it in a way that is useful and practical, and just the way we do it, I guess. So yeah, everybody kind of has it.
Mm. Yeah, I've wondered only because there's like that stereotype that children are kind of the most vulnerable to spirits, and I always kind of just thought maybe it's because they were kind of the closest ones to being able to reach into that realm because they're kind of naive and young and they haven't had it beaten out of them yet that like, oh, ghosts aren't real, or like like any of that nonsense.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And guess who the two kinds of people are that are closest to death? The ones that were just born and the ones just about to die.
Mm.
So, you always hear about people, little babies, like, oh, he was in his crib cooing, or she was in her crib cooing. It looked like she was talking to somebody. And then on the other side of it, when people on their deathbed, maybe a day or so before they pass away, they'll be like, oh, my mom is here. I think that it's almost time for me to go. And I hear stories like that all the time. And it makes sense. At the beginning of your life and the end of your life is when you're as close to that other side as you're ever going to be in the middle. So that's where we get a lot of interesting stories about that stuff.
Um, do you have any other mediums in your group, or is it just you who does it like by yourself for the most part?
Well, so what's happening right now with the P.A.R.S team is Patrick has taken a step back because he's become very busy with his personal life, which is totally understandable. Um, so I have taken over the reins, and with that happening, I have a couple other people that are stepping in, and they all have varying degrees of psychic ability. And I'm kind of trying to mentor them so that they can do the job that I was doing, and I can handle the case management. But unfortunately, you can't do both. You can't be the psychic and handle the case management because you have to have that clean slate of not knowing anything about the case. So right now, the P.A.R.S group has two other very, I will call them sensitive people that are very good at what they do. I'm not quite there yet, though.
Now, when it comes to finding new psychics for your group, or mediums? I don't know what you prefer. Sorry. Is it hard to kind of figure out whether or not someone actually has the ability, or because some people might just like say they have it. Do you have to put them through any sort of test to figure out if they actually do or not?
I have not had to do that for a couple of reasons, and the first reason is because the people that I have doing it are one is somebody who I've known since I was a kid, and I just know is because he has all the same kind of things that I do, so I didn't have to test him. He's very good at doing doing all this stuff anyway. And the other one is a female, and she is a witch, which I don't want that to scare anybody. She doesn't do black magic or any weird stuff, but she's also very psychic, and she's very good at doing mediumship. And both I sort of figured it out because of the things that they would tell me, and I realized that they were speaking the same kind of language as me. They understood the things I was talking about, and I understood how they were talking about ghosts and spirits and being able to describe things that I also was experiencing. So I knew that they had the capability, and now it's always a matter of for the person who is developing to trust their instinct that they're correct and know that it's okay to be wrong, but they're probably not.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. When you said she's a witch, you mean she's like a white witch or like that sort of thing? Because people hear witch and they think the witchcraft, all that, the bad stuff. I assume it's
no, nothing like that. Yeah, we wouldn't allow that on our team. We don't do anything like that. She's just a very knowledgeable person which is very good to have on the team on all things occult. She's a fantastic historian. So she's just a great person to have, and she does know how to use magic and stuff like that, which is funny because I don't necessarily subscribe to all that stuff, but I believe her and what she says she can do. So I said, good, you're on the team.
Gotcha. Are there any challenges that come up being a medium? Like anything that kind of gets exhausting or like just hard in any way?
Not for me, but for my family. Especially my wife. She says that, when something has my ear, she knows because I'm not listening to her. And it happens more often than I'd like it to. But she knows. She'll be like, who's talking to you if we're out somewhere doing something? She's like, you're supposed to be just hanging out with me right now. Who you're listening to? And it usually just happens when we're out, like you asked earlier about people's loved ones. Like I'll just see them hanging out with them at tables and restaurants or walking down the street with them and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a people watcher. So now I have the living to watch, and I see the deceased people walking around with their loved ones as well. It's kind of crazy.
I assume your family's very supportive since you do many investigations of your abilities and stuff, right?
Yeah, my wife, this came about after we were married, so she kind of had to just roll with it, but she is 110% supportive. As I'm talking to you, she's trying to wrestle the kids to get baths and get ready for bed. And I have the luxury of sitting and having a nice phone call and a chat about something I love. So yeah, she's super awesome and really supportive of everything.
Gotcha. I got one last question for you. What advice would you give to people who are just starting to realize that they might have psychic abilities? What could help them out that you wish you knew when you first figured it out?
I would say, kind of I hit on it earlier, is if you think that you have a psychic ability or mediumship, so psychic is somebody that might be able to just tell the future or know things about a person that nobody has told them. And a medium is somebody who speaks to people on the other side. You can be one or both. It doesn't matter. Depends on what your skills are going to be, and you'll find out as you go. But I would say is keep a journal of everything that you think is a psychic impression or a mediumship impression. Write it all down, and learn how to meditate. Once you do that, this entire skill set will open up to you, and you'll be able to look back on all of your thoughts and everything you wrote down and say, like, well, I did say that I thought somebody was going to have a car wreck on a Tuesday, and look at that. Uncle John actually ended up having a car wreck 3 months later, and I see the date was a Tuesday. So you may not have known the exact specifics, but the more you trust yourself because you've kept notes, the better and more specific you're going to become, because you're going to be less afraid of being wrong. And that's what I wish somebody had told me from the get-go, because I would have advanced much faster, but it took me a long time to not be afraid to say things in fear of being wrong. But luckily with Patrick, I could say the craziest stuff to him, and I'd write it down, or he'd videotape me saying it, and then we'd go into homes, and he'd come out and say, like, you nailed it. Like, you hit on everything that they talked about. There's things in that house that you mentioned and described specifically that are here on paper, and that's what developed my skill faster. So anybody who wants to develop, that's what I would want them to do.
Gotcha. Well, Scotty, I appreciate your time so much. This was a thrill for me. I really learned a lot, and anytime I can talk about ghosts, I'll take that advantage. I'll take that all the time, you know. So I appreciate you
Yeah, I'll be
coming
here
on.
anytime, man. I'm always willing to talk about ghosts. If you go through our webpage, parsinvestigations.com, or mine at scottythenjmedium.com, and you see anything that piques your interest and you think your listeners will care about, just let me know, and we'll do another one.
Oh, I would love to do another one in the future for sure. No question about that.
Awesome.
All right, I'm gonna end this. Thank you. So, anything else you want to add?
Nothing. I just want to say thanks to everybody for listening. I appreciate it. If your listeners have time and they want to hear me talk more about ghost stuff on my own, I have a podcast available anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's called Scotty the Medium versus the Paranormal, and I appreciate it if you take a listen to it.
Sounds great. All right, Scotty. Thank you so much again. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for listening. Take it easy.